and welcome to the American Public Works Association's Talking Top Tech webinar series. Today's panel discussion will be 1 hour in duration and is titled Talking Top Tech, Geographic Information System, GIS, and Mapping. Due to the free format of this program, it is not eligible for CEUs. I just wanted to let you know that we are having some technical issues today at APWA headquarters, so some of the items may appear grainy due to the file conversion. We appreciate your understanding of any technical issues during the program, but we felt it was important to deliver this program for our members today. So we're going to get started. My name is Rita Cassida, and I will be your facilitator today. I am an education manager at APWA. I have a BS in Mechanical Engineering from Kansas State University and an MS in Engineering Management from the University of Kansas. I am a licensed professional engineer in Kansas, and before joining APWA, I served as the Public Works Director for the City of Lewisburg, Kansas. A recording of today's program will be available in the APWA Members Library and on YouTube within a week. APWA members can log into the library to access free content free of charge. Today's session is interactive. So if you have any questions for our speakers, please type them into the chat pod. You may do this at any time throughout the program. For today's program, you may need to set up the chat pod. To do this, click the arrow in the Send To field to display a menu, and scroll to the top of the menu and select Host, Presenter, and Panelists. When you are in full screen mode, you can access the chat pod by hovering the mouse at the top of the screen and clicking the chat icon. After the program, please join us on LinkedIn to continue the conversation. A link was included in your program instructions and is on the screen now. Now it's time to introduce our panelists. Today we have Bob Basques, the GIS Systems Developer for the City of St. Paul Public Works. Chris Chappell is the GIS Manager for Anderson Engineering. Stephanie Dietrich is the Enterprise GIS and Open Data Program Manager for the City of Tempe. And Randy Knippel is the GIS Manager for the Dakota County Office of GIS. Bryson Kozel is the Esri Certified Enterprise Geodatabase Associate and Esri Certified Desktop Associate for CDM Smith. Chris Thomas is the Director of Government Markets for Esri. APWA is delighted to bring you such knowledge and experience. We are going to start the program with each of the panelists giving us a brief overview on how they are involved with GIS and mapping. Bob, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name is Bob. I work in the Public Works section of the City of St. Paul. My primary duties are kind of GIS related, but it's more focused on data retention, data management, those aspects. I'm basically the GIS system architect for data access for Public Works, managing the data maintenance, metadata, those kinds of things, archiving long-term stuff. We never throw anything away is kind of a point of fact. Storage, presentation, publishing of data. Do a lot of systems integration, CAD integration. That's how I got my start in GIS, is actually serving up data to the CAD and the design crews in the city, both in Public Works and in parks and water. They all have AutoCAD, and they ingest the data from our systems, and that's what the system was put in place primarily to satisfy, but we've since morphed it into kind of a web-based GIS access. A lot of business integrated systems, different agencies. We've got data coming in from different counties, different cities, neighboring cities, state, some federal links as well. And then I do quite a bit of R&D, and just recently got my certification for flying drones. So I'm kind of getting into that realm over there on that side of it, doing LiDAR data management, those kinds of things. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Chris Chappell, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. My name is Chris Chappell. I'm the GIS manager for Anderson Engineering. I've been in GIS for 23 years, focusing mostly on GIS implementation and data conversion. Here at Anderson, we primarily help smaller communities get their utility data converted from a variety of sources into a GIS that they can use to be more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Dietrich. I'm the Enterprise GIS and Open Data Program Manager in Tempe. Our work focuses on providing GIS services across the city. So that includes managing access to data, helping departments implement GIS in their work groups, and then sharing data across departments. With Public Works, a lot of our work started with helping them integrate kind of existing asset data into the enterprise environment so that it could be provided, access could be provided across the city and other departments or with external partners like Arizona State University's asset management program. A lot of the work that I've been doing, though, recently involves helping different departments in Public Works identify ways that they can leverage GIS in the work that they do, including providing ways to support people who are doing work out in the field where there may not be a separate software system that they necessarily would implement to support the work that's being done, like with our graffiti team, but where we can build some simple GIS web applications that they can use to access data in the field or generate data in the field that then can be viewed by managers or the director of Public Works to understand operationally what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Randy, looks like you're next.
Okay, hi, my name is Randy Knippel. I'm the GIS manager at Dakota County, Minnesota, which is the third largest county in Minnesota, located in the southern Twin Cities metro area. I'm in the Office of GIS, which is in the Information Technology Department. We provide GIS services to all county departments, ranging from simple maps to technical support, analysis, and application development. We have 11 small to medium-sized cities and have a long-standing collaborative relationship with them for coordinating development of GIS data and sharing the associated costs. We are also involved in various collaborative initiatives with the other 6 metro counties for developing common data standards, allowing county data sets to be easily appended to form regional data sets. This has become the foundation for the development of statewide data standards and data sets. I'm also involved in a national effort to promote the use of the U.S. National Grid, which is a national standard for describing locations, especially for emergency management, preparedness, and response. It's simply the civilian adaptation of the military grid referencing system. I've been conducting associated training for emergency responders and dispatchers on the use of the grid, including development of associated maps and applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Bryson, you're next. If you could give us your information, that would be great.
Sure, thanks. Good morning, everybody. My name is Bryson Kozel. I am with CDM Smith. I am a GIS project manager and consultant. Been with the firm about 19 years, performing regional utility provider and municipal GIS services. We do everything from data conversion to implementation of GIS data on an enterprise level, tying into other systems such as asset management and customer billing and hydraulic modeling. And most recently, we've been taking that GIS data that's been compiled and adding in business intelligence to that so that organizations can make intelligent decisions with the GIS data. Thanks, Rita.
Thank you, Bryson. And finally, we have Chris Thomas with Esri.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Thomas, and
I think we've lost you, Chris, at least the audio feed.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so my name is Chris Thomas, and I've been involved in the GIS industry for approximately 30 years. I started my career in city and county government, was an early pioneer of doing a lot of the founding work in GIS as far as how it looked within an organization. I was actually credited for one of the first enterprise GIS systems in the country, was actually one of the first people to use three-dimensional statistical information in a GIS, as well as being one of the first people to put GIS on the internet. I now have been at Esri as the Director of Government Markets for nearly 21 years. I lead a team of individuals who come from a lot of different domains: police, fire, urban planning, public works, water, and all the other disciplines within a state and local context. I'm a subject matter expert and lead strategist, and I work with this team to both figure out how we implement GIS technology along with other technologies in an organization, but also really looking sometimes maybe 5 and 10 years out as to what we think will be the use of technology to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Now we're going to get started with our question and answer panel. And just remember at any time to enter those into the chat pod. We do have a few questions that were sent in early. And we're going to start with a question. Why should I start a GIS program? And Stephanie is going to start with the answer for that. And any of the other panelists can follow up on other answers.
I think that's one of the kind of best questions that anyone who isn't necessarily using GIS robustly right now should ask themselves. And a lot of times when people think about GIS, they often think of just the mapping component, which is important. I started out as a cartographer creating maps and web maps for people. And so that's an important element to be able to see where things are at. But I think that the real benefit of GIS in a city and definitely in public works is the operational support it can provide, the fact that GIS visualization, data collection, data analysis, operational dashboards can allow departments to be very strategic in the work that they do, and that type of data and those tools can support decision making within public works and across the city. And so some examples of ways that GIS can be used. Asset mapping is foundational, so knowing where your assets are at, being able to track history, work that needs to be done, tying work orders to those locations. I mean, I think that's a foundational need. But then you can also do things where you're tracking progress and sharing that out with the community, or you're tracking progress and sharing that with your public works director to assess, whether a project is running on time. And you can even do things as kind of strategically focused as if you're managing your tree assets and you have a lot of construction going on in your city, like we do. We have buildings that are going up, so everything's going up, and we're suddenly getting a lot of shadows in our city, and that's going to impact our tree inventory. And so some trees don't do well in shadows, and so we're creating with our public works a 3D model so that we can help them actually model where shade is going to be, what type of ground cover or substrate there's going to be, how close it is to streets, to help them identify what types of trees would be better to put in those locations. Things like that sound complicated, but the software and technology have grown enough where you don't necessarily need a GIS expert. You don't need someone who has a degree in GIS or has been doing GIS for 20 years to be able to learn how to use those tools and do really sophisticated analysis and sophisticated data development on their own or with minimal guidance. And so I think that GIS is at the point to where really everybody can implement it and that everybody can get broad benefits out of it. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And then a similar question. what does it actually take to start GIS? Randy, did you have some information you wanted to add on that question?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, it needs to be done as an enterprise initiative. We see cases where it'll start with a champion someplace within the organization. It may be Public Works, it may be planning, it may be the IT department. And you want to leverage those champions for sure, but you want to get them talking to each other, and you really want to make sure that you have support for this initiative from the top down, including the entire organization. You want to make sure that any investment that's made in GIS technology is shared among everybody in the organization, and you want to make sure that you don't have different people, different departments going in different directions. It needs to be a coordinated effort. I think you need to also make sure that you are able to secure dedicated funding and professional staff with GIS experience. That counters a little bit of previous comment. And I think it really depends on where you are in the process of implementing GIS. Certainly, there are a lot of options available and a lot of different ways that you can do GIS and make use of GIS. And really, I think what we're really seeing is GIS technology being threaded into other disciplines and other educational tracks as well. So it's more commonplace now than it used to be, where it's really just a tool, just like any other kind of productivity tool, and that's good. But once you get to a certain point, I really think that you do want to have dedicated GIS staff to help coordinate that across the entire organization, so you're able to look for and realize the organization-wide benefits as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we also have Bob wanted to add on to that. So before we go to the next question, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Actually, it's tied into both Stephanie and Randy's comments there. My perspective from a municipal environment is if you're in a location kind of mode of collecting information anyway, which most municipalities are, they're already doing GIS, whether they call it GIS or not. My bigger deal on the GIS side of it is being able to organize the data for reuse by other people so people can understand how their data relates to others. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Bob. And actually, the next question I was going to ask was for you. So you're still up. What is the most important component of a GIS system?
It's kind of already been touched on a little bit, but my perspective is that it's the data. It doesn't matter what kind of software it is or any of those kinds of things. Again, I've already mentioned when I was on the initial interview there that we never throw anything away. If the item or infrastructure that we're tracking is out in the field, so we have to maintain that information. Some of those things that we've got in our files are back to the 1860s. I know there's other organizations that have even older stuff than that, but we're not that big of a place in St. Paul, and there's a lot of records that we have stored, and they all need to be accessible by everybody. So the data would be first, and then accessibility would be second.
All right, great. Thank you so much. The next question is for Chris Chappell. My consultant is pushing us towards the web or the cloud. Is this the best place to put all of our GIS data?
I'm not an expert by any means, but my philosophy is that it may not be the best place, but it is a good place to put the data. It makes it easily accessible to anyone without having to have the software. And a lot of municipalities do like to have some of their information available to the public, but it's also an easy way to disseminate your data. One of our clients, it's very basic, but they have their field crew, electric, sewer, and water, out with tablets so they can add notes and see any part of the system that they need to. So I'd say the web is a good thing, but maybe not the best thing.
All right, thank you. And then the next question, Chris Thomas, or Oh, looks like, sorry, before we go to the next question, we have two presenters that also wanted to answer that. We'll start with Bryson Kozel and then follow up with Bob Basques.
Thanks, Rita. I just wanted to add, I agree with Chris, depending where you store your data depends on, security and a lot of other concerns, but getting your data in a web-based environment is, I think, a really good idea because it, covers some of the things that Bob mentioned when he was talking, is data access. It's one of the easiest ways to get your data out there, and there's a lot of built-in functionality with the web GIS programs that are out there now that you can take advantage of, like the dashboards that were mentioned earlier, field data collection. So I think getting your data web accessible, I'll say, is really an important factor of getting your GIS established.
All right, and then Bob, did you have something else you wanted to add on that question?
Yeah, just kind of rounding out that whole thought process there. We actually use cloud services as well as internal services, and we use them for different reasons. I can jump into a bunch of technical stuff about bandwidth, those kinds of things. But in general, the clouds will allow you to get started much quicker. Way back when I started, almost 25 years ago, and this was very hard to kind of set up GIS systems. The cloud stuff will allow you to do that much quicker now. A lot more talent out there available to get you going. But over the long term, what you really want to worry about is how do you get that data back and keep an archive of it someplace. And it should be another copy that you have internally in your office someplace.
Thank you, Bob. And then I think Stephanie had something to add on this question.
Thank you. I think that what everyone else has said is really important, and the fact that kind of putting your data in the cloud is a good way to get started if you don't necessarily have the server infrastructure to be able to start your data from that point. I think the other benefit of having your data either moving from server into the cloud for access or starting with being in the cloud is that ability to collaborate with outside agencies. And so not just providing data out to the public, but one of the things that we're going to use for our cloud-based data is sharing with Arizona State University. We have a lot of shared water assets. And so if there's a water leak or something happens, they have to easily be able to identify who owns what to know which agency should be, responding to that leak. And they're going to be sharing their data with us from their cloud-based platform, and we're going to be sharing our data with them through ours. And so having that cloud-based information is really important for just external collaborations in general, but specifically, especially if you're talking about other agencies that need access to field data quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And then the next question was for Chris Thomas. What are some of the emerging technology trends to watch over the next few years?
Well, everybody's kind of talked about their history a little bit, about what they've been doing, and systematically what we've seen is that a lot of the things that people have been working on have really been around asset management and a lot of just creating information. But the bigger trends that we're starting to see is around these concepts of a hub, and people have kind of touched on it, but it's an operational way of organizing your information so that everybody has access to what they need. So in other words, if there's a topic that's cross-department, something like homelessness or doing your infrastructure, you have the ability for everybody to access that information. But on a bigger trend, what we're starting to see is what we would call real-time GIS or real-time decision-making. I've been following Stephanie's work for years, and she's done some amazing jobs with some of the dashboards that she's done. But the reality is that what we're looking at is this concept of dashboard, which has been around a long time, where you've been able to see information in one point of view. But now what we have is the use of sensors and real-time data sets merged with your other back office systems like finance and accounting and material and CRM systems, where you're actually going from a kind of a just-in-time or moving through, where you're beginning to actually start to use the GIS and the dashboard functionality of changing the way that we're working in public works. This winter, we saw a lot of organizations monitoring in real time their snow plows. They not only could see where the snow plows were, but they could actually move the snow plows based on population and the different at-risk organizations, and they could see in real time how much it was costing them to do that work, and at the same time promote that activity to the public so they could see what was going on in their community and what it was costing them to do that work. I think there's a lot of things on the horizon that are becoming really excited, but that's a merger of a lot of different concepts, open data and other things.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. And Stephanie had something she wanted to add to that answer.
I think that idea of real-time understanding of what's going on and being able to respond to those things definitely are areas where we're seeing a lot of growth and that we're really trying to push kind of the support that we're providing. And so I had mentioned at the beginning work that we're doing with our graffiti team, but you know, graffiti tags can be an indication of if there's gang activity going on. You may have graffiti that have, you know, racial slurs or other overtones where public safety would want to be involved. And so we're working with our graffiti field team right now to implement in their GIS web application that they work in a trigger where if they identify that, you know, a tag may relate to gang activity or is racial in nature, that there's a trigger that happens that sends that information to our gang unit, and they will then see that you know, what has happened. They'll actually be able to see a description of the tag, they'll see a picture of the tag, and then they'll be able to go into their operational dashboard to go and view where that tag is at. After that point, they'll have access to the data to be able to do prosecution if they're, you know, trying to form a case about something else. But there's a tight relationship that's forming between our police department and public works. And so a lot of these real-time systems not only can support, you know, better services to citizens and making sure that you're maintaining assets and addressing needs as they happen, but it also can have a real public safety impact as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Randy, you wanted to add to that answer as well?
Yeah, I mentioned this a little, I mentioned this earlier, but one of the trends that I'm seeing is, you know, as far as GIS being integrated into other disciplines, you know, we'll get like an intern for the summer that knows more in a particular department or a work unit that knows more about GIS than other people in the department. And then that knowledge and experience, expertise goes away at the end of the internship. So, you know, we're finding, you know, younger people coming out of school that in particular disciplines like natural resources and engineering and things like that, that really know more about GIS than the people that they're working for. And so you want to watch for that and try to figure out how you can cultivate that and make sure that it doesn't get stifled. I mean, I've been in the business for quite a while. I consider myself an old timer to a certain degree, and we have to be careful that we take advantage of those new ideas and don't stifle them.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer and sharing that with our audience. Next, we have a question for Bryson about how can the GIS environment support the asset management program. Can you touch on that, Bryson?
Yes, absolutely. So assuming that you have some GIS in place already, that your utilities have been mapped and you have some base map data behind the scenes, now you can really start to bring your GIS to the next level. And if you don't have an asset management system in place already, that's okay. You can start to use your GIS to collect this information and create these tables that relate to your GIS that will hold inspection information. So if you're out doing a valve exercising program, that would be something that you could funnel through the GIS and deploy a field application, smart forms, things like that, to collect the information that you're finding when you go turn these valves, and also store the history of when you turn the valve. Other things like hydrant painting and all the maintenance types of activities, you can deploy field applications to collect this information and start storing it, and then start looking at it historically and finding trends and making business decisions with the data that you've been capturing. That's all linked right up to your GIS.
All right, thank you, Bryson. And looks like Christopher Thomas wanted to add on to that one.
For those individuals who are kind of just getting started, I would say that, there's a lot of change in the industry as to how people can deploy the different types of things that they want to achieve with the GIS. And for those of you who may not know it, there's a lot of free tools out there. So a lot of people talked about the mobile devices, the free-form tools, what have you. I can just speak from our perspective that what we've done is we've developed a whole series of free tools that are absolutely available to anybody for free download. They'll do anything like asset inventory, they'll do data collection, and what have you, that you can begin to deploy immediately, and they don't need any programming. It's a great start if you don't have a sophisticated GIS program in place, and it's a little bit stronger. It's not as strong as some of the other things that are on the market, where you'd have a CityWorks or a Cartograph or some of the more robust asset management systems. But these are ways that you can start going forward where you weren't able to do this at a quick pace. In today's times, there's over 600 free applications that public works professionals can take advantage of. There's tools that we have learned over the years of asking the questions in a needs assessment, what would I want to do with a GIS? And instead of going back and reinventing the wheel each and every time, we've just made them openly available. So back to you.
Thank you, Chris. And next we have a question. Randy touched on this earlier, but the question is, what role should GIS play in emergency preparedness and management?
Government entities have made significant public investments in developing GIS data to support their normal business processes. And this data really forms a comprehensive model of our communities, which can be very useful for emergency preparedness management and response, especially in major disasters. It forms the basis of a common operating picture among agencies for emergency response, recovery, mitigation, and planning. However, standardization is key. Some important issues to address include working with emergency services personnel to help them understand what is available in terms of data and professional resources. Develop a professional relationship and the agreements to allow GIS staff and data to be used in emergency situations. You don't want to wait till a disaster happens to go knock on the door at the Emergency Operations Center. They're not going to let you in. So you need to create those relationships ahead of time. But then we need to make sure that GIS staff are trained in the incident command system. In fact, FEMA requires all public employees that may be involved in an emergency response situation to have basic incident command system training, and I don't believe that's really universally true yet. And then create GIS data standards and standard operating procedures among neighboring jurisdictions. We get into mutual aid situations. We want to make sure that we can leverage GIS personnel in our cities as well as our neighboring counties and help each other out with GIS and mapping support in a disaster. And then implement and promote the use of the U.S. National Grid as a standard location referencing system. That's a national standard that was adopted 12 years ago, and it's only still being adopted by local and state government, and we need to really continue to promote that as a common way of using GPS coordinates. People think we can just use GPS and don't realize that there are many different coordinate systems, many different formats, and that can really create a lot of confusion, and you don't want that happening in a disaster emergency situation. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I think, Chris Thomas, did you want to add to that, followed by Bob Basques? Chris, did you want to go first?
I can. I was just, I didn't know I had my hand up. But the, right now we're fervently working on Hurricane Florence, and everything that Randy says is absolutely true. We have a crew here that begins working with the different groups like GIS Corps, which is a volunteer organization through ERISA that goes on site and works. But the funny thing is that when we look at it is if you have already, there's no value in trying to deploy a new app in the middle of a disaster. During the last hurricane, what we saw in Panelists, we saw them try to evacuate an entire island in a short period of time. They had statistics that it could take up to 30 days under normal circumstances, but because they put the road closure applications and all the public information out there and empowered the city workers and county workers to have the information on what's going on, they were able to actually evacuate the island systematically in a fraction amount of time. And that's because they had the apps ready, the data ready, and they had already trained all the people on how to use these things. We're seeing the exact same thing taking place in the Florence hurricane right now, and I think being prepared and being part of those operations is really just critical. We see where other parts of the country are going through the exact same thing, and we can see the comparisons of what it's like not to have that preparation in place. Thank you.
All right, and then Bob, did you want to add to that answer?
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce Randy's statements and then also kind of add in the emergency management side of it. Actually kind of, in my mind, it bleeds out, and based on my experience, it bleeds out of the fact that you have GIS systems in place in the first place. All of a sudden, the emergency managers start seeing the things that are available and want to use them in their own systems. But my bigger point that I wanted to make is that you make these relationships early and get people using these tools in their day-to-day operations. That's another big point that you need to kind of stress, because having that relationship going in your day-to-day operations makes it much easier to respond to any kind of emergency after the fact.
Thank you, Bob. And Stephanie, looks like you have your hand up to answer as well.
One of the things I think, too, that is the benefit of having a plan to implement GIS in an emergency is the idea of being able to get additional operational information or situational awareness from the public. And so a few years back where Tempe had really large storms to the point where something unusual for us, we had freeways flooding, up to the doors of cars, and we had massive trees going down, a lot of damage, and we quickly implemented an application where we shared it with the public and they could provide information directly to Public Works about areas where they were seeing trees being down in the road, which could be an issue for emergency responders trying to get access to someone who's having an emergency, or information about large amounts of debris or flooding. And other issues where the city may not have the resources to identify all those things that are happening at that time. And so that kind of a public engagement of letting them understand what's going on and letting them contribute information, I think, is really a powerful addition that you can get with GIS. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And then let's see, the next question is for Chris C., I believe. Got two Chris's going. What are we are a small town, and we don't have the budget for GIS staff or software. What are some good GIS options to get our sewer and water systems into GIS? And I think that was for Chris Chappell, or if anybody else wants to answer that.
Yeah, and there's several options. We work with a lot of very small cities that have a very small budget, and we try to make it as easy and as affordable as possible. Especially like if you take sewer, for example, it's a lot of times if the county has some fairly decent aerial photography, it's pretty easy to go out and identify the manholes and fire hydrants, or just some basic training for some quick and easy GPS data collection. There's a lot of options to make it easy for especially smaller communities to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And Bob, do you want to add to that question?
Yeah, my background is kind of open source, so a lot of our systems are based off of open source kind of software, which is stuff that you can literally download for free. There's a cost to implementing it and managing it, and just like any other piece of software that you would go and buy off the shelf. But there are many tools out there that are already available for people that kind of attack GIS aspects, and they don't need to do a big comprehensive system. They can do it from the infrastructure management. They can do it from the social media data collection side. They can do it from the vehicle tracking or personnel tracking. There's all kinds of little systems that you can start out with to kind of get the hang of how GIS can help you in your organization.
Thanks, Bob. And the next question was for Wendy. From Wendy to Stephanie. Can Stephanie address the use of GIS with capital projects? For instance, addressing ADA improvements or snapshots for the public showing what projects are going on, the name, scope of work, progress, budget, timeline, etc. That one was for Stephanie.
I think that using GIS to let people know, what is going on, what kind of large-scale projects might be impacting them, or like with ADA, helping the community be aware that we are assessing broadly across the city accessibility, identifying what those issues are, and then communicating out our plan for addressing them, and then our progress in addressing them. And we've had a lot of success with some of our initial kind of dashboards that we've put out for that purpose. So our Pavement Quality Index web application provides information about recent assessments of pavement quality. It also provides some education about what does a pavement quality score mean. It communicates out to people how much it costs to resurface a road, so that when people are frustrated that their neighborhood isn't being kind of addressed first, that they understand that it costs a lot of money to be able to do that work. It provides information to them on the capital improvement plan for road resurfacing, so that they know potentially when their area is going to be addressed. And then it also provides information about traffic volume. So how much traffic do you get in different parts of the city, which should inform kind of what roads you're dealing with first. For our ADA transition plan, we're basically doing an inventory and assessment of every sidewalk in the city, all city facilities, all of our parks, all of our intersection crossings, and it's a massive amount of data, and it's a massive amount of money to address all those issues. And so this is going to be a 15 to 20-year plan to try to address all of this, and providing tools that provide narratives like a story map. So we actually walk people visually through what a transition plan is. We give them examples of different issues we are going to be addressing, and then we provide them with some web maps in that same environment so that they can see kind of what our plan is. They can identify when we're going to be getting to, let's say, their park. They can identify how much we've already done, and there's a tool for them to be able to contact the city with concerns or questions. And so the GIS element actually provides more than information about the spatial component, but it can be a tool to really provide context and broader explanations out to the community about things that we may not, we may understand really well, but for kind of the average person are really either foreign ideas or really complicated and hard to understand without kind of providing the visual and then the narrative that goes with it. Back to you.
Thank you. And then we will go, Bryson had something he wanted to add on that one?
Yes, I think that question really speaks to, again, getting your data accessible and having it, or at least portions of your GIS in a web-based system, because in a web-based system you can allow public to view pieces of your GIS that you allow, and you know, the programs or the projects that are being completed within a municipality or within a service area can be displayed for the public, and you can include things like project photos and emergency contacts and timelines, things like that, road closures. So having your data web accessible, it really makes doing something like that much, much easier.
Okay, thank you very much. And then let's see, next we are going to Chris Thomas. What are some ways I can keep myself and my current staff current on training? Do you want to do that one, Chris Thomas?
Control panel. There's a number of ways to get things training, but what I would point out is that first and foremost, a lot of the individuals have kind of brought this up. It's really critical to have your staff kind of current on not just GIS technology, but other things that are out there. And some of the folks have brought this up already, but you will use GIS in a lot of ways that you didn't even recognize that you're even using the tools. For example, there are free tools now within Microsoft Office where somebody can use Excel and actually begin doing some real basic mapping in the same way that you would do a pie chart or a bar chart. You do the mapping right within the Microsoft environment. But just knowing a few things to get kind of going, there are now over 2,000 universities that have GIS programs in place. Sometimes they're in GIS and sometimes they're in other disciplines. As Randy pointed out, natural resources, business, and some of the other areas that are out there. This follows suit that a lot of community colleges now are offering that same type of training. But I point out that all those same virtual campus courses that are the same courses that are used as the workshops for most degree programs are openly and freely available to anybody who wants to use them. There's also a concept of a MOOC, which is a massive online training where upwards of 30 or 40,000 people will take a GIS course at a single time. And these are also free and oftentimes are good for your continuing education units in a lot of different disciplines. But the final thing I kind of point out is that GIS is really kind of an ecosystem and is a community, just like the public works is a community, where that you can oftentimes go in and just connect in with other people in your areas. All the people on the phone talked about their work across different cities and counties and different departments. And what I'd encourage a lot of people is just get out there and seek out your user groups or your meetup groups that are out there on a regular basis. There's a lot of free training and there's a lot of paid training that you can go out there and get. But being informed, there's so many options today as in a ways for you to be able to just keep current. And I would just encourage people just to get out there and see what's available. Thanks for you.
Thank you, Chris. And Bryson, did you want to add to that? I see your hand is up.
Nope, sorry about that. I forgot to take my hand down.
Okay, didn't want to leave you out. All right. Next, we're going to go to a question. I believe it's for Randy. What are your policies and procedures for sharing data with the organizations and the public?
Well, 30 years ago, when Dakota County began developing a GIS database, we leveraged a provision in Minnesota Data Practices Law that allowed government entities to charge fees for data, and that included the recovery of a portion of the data development costs. In collaboration with our cities, we formed a cost-sharing partnership and an enterprise fund to receive revenue from data sales, which could be used to offset costs for data development and maintenance. This cost recovery model was used by a number of other counties and cities in Minnesota and across the nation. This was important 20 to 30 years ago when GIS was very expensive, but since then, the cost of doing GIS has really come down, while at the same time the use of GIS data applications has increased considerably. This has created a much higher return on investment than was possible in the early years. This, along with the public demand for transparency in government, has driven a national trend to make GIS data free and openly available. We explored this in 2013 along with our neighboring counties through a GIS collaborative in the area called Metro GIS. In 2014, all 7 counties changed our GIS data policies to make all county GIS data free and openly available. Of course, that's public GIS data. This has provided a variety of benefits. We did a significant amount of research on that. If you'd like to know more about that, you can just do a Google search on Metro GIS free and open data, and you can find all of our research information and some good tools that you can use within your own organization to promote this kind of an initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is about what are some of the application areas or uses of GIS that are realizing the strongest return on investment? Chris Thomas, can you start with the answer on that one?
Yeah, I think what's surprising is that a lot of the stuff that we've been seeing is just that when we start to apply things like asset management, we're seeing big return on investments because our operations are becoming more fluid, and we're seeing where to put things, how to prioritize our work. But, you know, when you start to look at some of the emerging technologies, and Bob brought up drones as an example, when drones first came out, people kind of thought they were really cool, but they weren't quite sure what they would be doing with them. But one of the areas that we're beginning to see people take off on is the use of drones for doing things like inspections of bridges, water tanks, and even doing pre-site selection and site work. We have one county that's saving over $6,500 a tank just on doing the inspection via a drone. We're talking the big water tanks. And because of the accuracy of the cameras that are on these today, we actually have, you know, clarity of the tank and on a resolution of the imagery that just is unbeatable in today's times, and at a fraction of the cost of what it was just a few years ago. But I think with the return on investment we're starting to see is really in what Stephanie had brought up and some of the others is what we're really seeing is a lot of working around collaboration. I would have probably saved this for a different discussion, but a lot of the people on the panel have brought up the concept of open data. And what we learned that open data was a mandate, as Randy put out there, for transparency and accountability. But in our research, what we found out was the #1 user of open data was the departments themselves within an organization. And what we saw was the biggest return on investment was a reduction in the number of data sets that were being replicated across different departments, but also a jump start in the way that people were able to get their programs going because they have access to new tools and new data that they didn't even know existed within their own organizations. For me, I spent a career looking at return on investment, and we see over and over again that there is massive benefits to deploying, you know, business intelligence through GIS. And changing the way we do things. You know, Bob's brought up a couple times, you don't throw any data away, but data that's never used doesn't have much value. And you never know when you're going to be able to use that information. And I think there's a lot of other things I could go on to, but I think just getting out there and exploring what others are doing really opens your mind and eyes, just like this program today, as to what the different people are doing in their organizations.
Thank you, Chris. And Bob, did you want to follow up on the answer to that question?
Yeah, I just want to kind of take it from a slightly different perspective than what Chris was talking about there. And I agree with everything that Chris said, by the way. But from my perspective, it's more along the lines of organizing the data and making it available. And in doing that organizational step, you begin to engender trust in the system that the data that you're looking at is true and form and it's up to date and all those kinds of things, because everybody's going to the same filing cabinet, if you will, of data. As you get more and more authors putting their data into some kind of a standardized system, you get more and more trust in the system, and people start using that data across the borders of their own responsibilities. So somebody that's recording data for things out in the field may not understand that down the line their data is being used by 2 or 3 other individuals in the same organization, because their data, they don't see that happening. when you have some kind of a centralized system, all of a sudden those kinds of uses are seen from end to end of the organization. And all of a sudden you start doing improvements that make everything work much faster and better.
All right. And Stephanie, did you want to add to that answer as well?
Thank you. I wanted to add on to what Chris was saying when he started talking about open data and use of data across departments. The other area where we're starting to see some growth is the idea of having open applications. So when one group or one city develops, let's say, a really useful dashboard that gets published, and another city sees that, there's the ability to share those applications so that either other groups in your city or other, if you're supporting other cities, that they don't have the development costs that maybe would be incurred otherwise. And so it may not necessarily be only a return on investment for the city that creates it, but if this idea of sharing data and sharing, foundational applications continues to grow, I think that across the board that there's a potential to really start reducing some of the overhead in implementing GIS or implementing some of these tools. Thank you.
And Randy, more to add to that answer? It looks like you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned, but I think that I work for a county, and I mentioned in my introduction that we have worked collaboratively with our cities for many years. I think that's very important. There's a lot, along with being able to share information across departments within a single organization. GIS really knows no boundaries. There's a certain body of the base mapping data that needs to be shared across organizations as well. So cities working with counties, counties working with their neighboring counties, counties working with the state, and understanding some of the federal trends with regard to data development and data standards. We all need to work together. You cannot work in isolation. There are stories out there of a duplication of effort and taxpayer dollars being spent multiple times to collect the same data, like aerial photography and things like that. And so we really need to be working together among agencies sharing the same geography, but also adjacent geographies as well. So I want to encourage people to really seek out the other organizations that you can work with and form partnerships to share the cost of some of that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we're down to our last question, and it is for Chris Chappell. How important is accuracy? When we started 10 years ago, we had 3-meter mapping grade GPS units. Now we have better technology. Can you comment on the accuracy question, Chris Chappell?
Well, if you would have asked me this 15 years ago, I probably would have had a different opinion. I used to be a tremendous stickler for accuracy, but I think it depends. In my 4 years here as a consultant working with the other smaller cities, I've realized that it's important to them, the guys working out in the field. They're happy just to be able to see a hydrant or a power pole there on the map, and they can turn around and look and see that it's there. But I guess it really depends on your situation. You obviously don't want to go out digging for a sewer main if it's possibly 3 or 4 feet off. That's why they have these dig right or 800 numbers you can call. So I think the short answer is, I guess it's subjective. It depends on what you're using it for, but you don't have to have sub-centimeter accurate grade GPS units to go out and build your GIS with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Well, that's all the time we have for today's program. I want to thank Bob, Chris Chappell, Stephanie, Randy, Bryson, and Chris Thomas for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. This is Rita Cassida, and it has been a pleasure moderating this program for you today. Please remember to register for the next program in this series titled Talking Top Tech, Unmanned Aircraft Systems UAS, and drones. It's scheduled for Thursday, October 11th at 10 a.m. Central. Also, don't forget to fill out the evaluation form. The link to the survey will be emailed after the program. A recording of today's program will be available in the APWA Members Library and on YouTube within a week. APWA members can log onto the library to access past Click, List, and Learn and Talking Top Tech programs and conference content as well, free of charge. If you're not a member, you can take a trust drive of the members library. So please see the link for that. And then finally, after today's program, please join the LinkedIn community to continue the conversation. This link was included in your program instruction and is on the screen now. I want to thank you for your attendance and participation during this program, and have a great day.